Welcome to Lost in Games Unscripted, a series I literally just came up with about 30 minutes ago. You might think I'm joking, but I was sitting there reading comments from the Season 2, Episode 5 of The Walking Dead. And I was looking through the comments, and there were some awesome comments on there. You all made some good points, and you pointed out, give me your choices and why you made those choices. But one thing that really struck me is the debate and argument between Kenny and Jane. It's something that I've seen before. I knew it was kind of a thing within the Walking Dead universe in general, but I didn't realize how big of a thing it was until I actually put that video out. And I wanted to address it a little bit and talk about it because I honestly think that Kenny and Jane, the whole debate between the two of them, boils down in a large way to just really bad writing on Telltale's part. Now, there's a lot of situations within the Walking Dead universe in the game where you can attribute things to bad writing. But with Telltale in particular, because Season 1 was something that was so different and was so massive for the industry, I think a lot of people gave them a pass and just said, well, their writing is supposed to be good and we're just going to go. And then when Season 2 came along, that became a little bit more difficult. Season 3, Season 4 became more difficult to justify the writing. But when I talk about the writing, what I'm talking about is specifically the character development and the world building. Now, we all know the whole your choices matter thing that they bring up in the beginning of every single episode, letting you know that the choices you make will impact things later on. In Season 1, that was kind of true for some things, but at the end of the day, it really wasn't true, because at the end of Season 1, no matter what choices you made along the way, you wind up with Clementine leaving with Kristen Omid. That's pretty much it. Lee dies every single time. Kenny disappears in a different way each time. Every other character dies in their own way or disappears in their own way. There's not really many choices you can make. So in Season 2, Telltale wanted to ramp things up a little bit because they heard that controversy, and they said, well, we're going to make it even better in Season 2. There's going to be alternate endings. Now, we'll ignore for the moment that they kind of screwed the pooch with getting into Season 3 after the way they ended Season 2. But let's look at Season 2 for just a minute, because we'll start with the Carver storyline, all right? Carver was introduced as this big bad guy. He was supposed to be this guy that was going to be like, you're supposed to be afraid of him, and he was going to be like this tyrant, and he was in a lot of ways. But at the end of the day, he really was only around for one episode. Episode 1 he's kind of talked about briefly. Episode 2 you meet him for the first time, and then at the end he winds up taking you and your group back to his compound. Episode 3 is where you actually interact with him, and then he dies at the end of Episode 3. Like, that's it. Carver's killed by Kenny in a moment of retribution, and that's pretty much all we ever hear from him again, right? And then we look at Kenny and Jane. Now, ignoring Luke for a moment, because, I think a lot of people thought at first that Luke was going to be the one to challenge Kenny at the end of the season. We have Jane come in, and Jane, we already know Kenny is a complex character. We've known Kenny from Season 1. But Jane is a subtly complex character. And what I mean by that is Jane has a lot of trauma. She has a lot of things that have happened in her past, namely with her sister, especially with her sister, where she tried to push her through and tried to get her to get up every day, and then eventually her sister just wouldn't get up and she had to leave her behind. And because of that, as well as a couple other instances, experiences that she had after, she has grown to this point where she just doesn't want to be a part of a group. She's scared to be in a group because she's scared of being hurt. And it's a thing that I think a lot of people don't really fully understand or fully grasp, because that kind of trauma, when you're in a situation where you have been hurt by somebody in a way that makes it almost impossible, normally you would think of it with relationships, right? You're in a really bad relationship for a long period of time. You get out of that bad relationship. It can be hard to get back into a new relationship because it's hard to trust somebody when you've been hurt so bad, right? And I think that's really what happens with Jane. It's hard to trust because she's been hurt really bad over time, not just with her sister, but with other group experiences. And then she starts to kind of care about Clementine, who reminds her of her little sister in a lot of ways. And she starts to kind of care about Luke a little bit because, you know, he's charismatic. As they mentioned when they're talking about the fire, he's just kind of like the ladies' man, right? Bonnie likes him. Jane likes him. He's just, all the women seem attached to Luke, right? So she kind of starts feeling like maybe this whole group thing's not so bad. But then Luke dies. And at the same moment, as I mentioned in the episode breakdown, she finds out that Bonnie and Luke had a thing in the past, which she might have thought about, but I don't think really hit her until the moment that he died, right? So she's got all of this going on, and now something flips in her. She goes, okay, you know what, groups, I was right all along. Groups aren't safe. I need to get away. I need to get out of the situation. But she still kind of has an attachment to Clem. She doesn't want to leave her behind, right? Because she feels like she would be leaving behind like she did with her little sister. But Clementine actually wants to live. So if she leaves and then Clementine dies, she would feel bad, right? So she has all of these things going on. And for her, it amounts to breaking down and going after Kenny specifically, because she sees Kenny as like this figure that she has to push out of the way, but also like he's the one that's been he is the epitome of the group, right? He looks out for the group, and she knows it. She sees him, and even with everything he goes through, sacrificing for the group and getting over Sarita in a way to go, and so she sees Kenny as this kind of member, the leader of the group, the guy that's kind of keeping the group together, and she thinks if she can just prove that Kenny's not good to Clementine, that she can prove that she was right about groups all along and that they need to get away from groups. And that's one of the two ways where I think Telltale really screwed up when it came to the storytelling aspect. First of all, I think with Carver should have been at least a couple of episodes. I also think that Carver at the end, it really should have been Kenny versus Carver, and you have to decide which one you want to side with. Writing Carver as a better character would have really built that up, right? But then Kenny versus Jane, the better way, the way that they should have ended it, would have been to have Jane push Kenny, and depending on what choices you as Clementine made when talking to Kenny, right, and when talking to Jane, you get to the point where Jane does her thing where she leaves AJ in the car and she's trying to really rile Kenny up. But what if they had an ending where Kenny didn't let that get to him? What if you had an ending where Kenny said, okay, Jane, I understand what you're going through. You know, I forgive you for losing AJ. And for that to click in a moment where Jane could be like, holy shit, I've tried to push him away and he's not going away, and could bring her into the fold to where you could have all four of them, including AJ, at Wellington at the end, right? Because I don't think that Jane or Kenny are bad people. It's easy, right, to say, well, Kenny's bad because he gets angry too easily. Jane's bad because she riled Kenny up and she hid the baby. But at the end of the day, it's not that simple. It's not black and white. It's not good versus evil. It is humanity. It is how people react in situations and go when they've been through trauma specifically. You know, the fact that the fact that Clementine isn't worse off for the trauma she's been through is partially based on how young she was, and she's kind of been able to adjust to the world a little bit better than the older people. But also because she's a character player in season 2, right? She's kind of the moral ground for everything. Even in season 2, she's the one that's supposed to be where everybody's looking to. And I think we're getting rain, so I'm gonna have to cut this short. But, all right, well, we had to run from the rain, but I wanted to finish this real quick before leaving and heading back home. Because my goal is to have these outside and get outside of the parks, because I think it's important to get out to parks, especially if you love games. But Kenny and Jane, I want to know what you guys think. Based on what I was talking about, based on what I said, I don't think that they are as bad as people make them out to be. I don't think they're as bad as people make them out to be. I think they are very complex characters, but I think Jane is She's just as complex as Kenny, but she's underappreciated because I think a lot of the people that talk about her, whether it's on YouTube or in comments or Reddit or wherever it happens to be, people get very defensive of Jane because she's a likable character. If you get past the trauma and everything else that's going on with her. But so is Kenny. And I think it's important to realize these are just like real people. They're video game characters and they're written to be video game characters. But in a way, they kind of represent real people that you might know in your everyday life. They might be somebody that you would identify with, even. So it's important to keep that in mind when you're talking about these characters. And especially, don't hate on people in the comments. Don't get mad and angry. Don't get personal. If you want to talk about your choices and you want to talk about why you made those choices, that's fine. Don't berate other people for their reasons. Don't tell other people they're bad. Don't block everybody. Don't put everybody that supports Kenny or Jane in their own block because you don't know their reasons until you've had a conversation and talked to those things. Be understanding. That's what this entire channel is about, is to understand other people's perspectives and viewpoints. That's the whole point of the Philosophy and Ethics series, and especially the Friend or Foe series, which Kenny and Jane will both be treated to next week. So, that being said, I think I'm going to try to get home, trying to catch my breath. We had to run quite a ways to get back to the car, and it was pouring the rain. But we need to... Now it's stormy. But we're going to try to get home and get dried off a little bit. But let me know in the comments what you think about Kenny and Jane, whether you think they're friends or foes. That's going to be coming up next week. And I want to thank you all for watching. Everybody have a great rest of your day. I'll see you in the next one.